but you are all in leadership in church, so I'm going to share from my personal experience of what God has done. So there's an element of prophetic, and you know that when that is said, you go away and test it. You don't have to accept anything I say. Okay, I found myself latterly over the last few years in a number of spiritual battles pertaining to the two speakers before, Andy and Paul, spoke about. And much of that spiritual battle occurred around the issue of what is called critical social justice. Now, some of you will know what critical social justice is, but it's a whole bag of philosophies that underpin expressive individualism. All those philosophies that make truth relative, which means that your truth isn't my truth. There isn't objective truth. That is very much the spirit of the age that God wanted to speak to me about. And I ended up in a battle within a church situation, which, again, as it's not my church, but I was working with the church leader, I worked on them to identify. But two things happened, and I'm throwing this out for you to go away and ask God about. One was that God said that behind what we were encountering with critical social justice, and please go and look that up, it's not something I'm making up myself. There's a huge debate going on, particularly from liberals who are historically liberals, enlightened liberals, who are saying, we don't like this because it denies objective truth. It's very much about the individual's truth. Okay? God said to me and to others, this is Leviathan. Now, biblically, Leviathan is a chaos-creating monster. It's not a moral agent. It's a chaos-creating monster. And I would argue a little bit of what we are seeing, particularly in the gender debates, is causing an element of chaos, particularly for children. And I've encountered that. And so God very specifically said, you are up against Leviathan, a chaos-creating monster. Cut me off if I'm going on too long, because there's a story really. I was recently then in a big central London Anglican church where they were talking about 1 John, and they were talking, the minister was talking about it from the front, and he was talking about love. And I knew what he was grappling with. He was asking the question, how is it that everything, under the banner of love, everything is permissible? How do we unpick that? And I, at the end, went up to him and I said, I know what the problem is here. We have, instead of God is love, we have said love is God. We have turned God into an abstract concept, not a personal God. And what he did, he flashed back at me like this, and I was really taken aback. And he said to me, oh yes, I know what that is. It's an idol. And I thought, I don't know what you mean, but you know what you mean. You know, I have to go away and think about this. You are a very godly man leading a huge church, and you instantly got it when I said, this is Leviathan, and you said, it's an idol. And so I said, Lord, how does it fit together? And I'm going to posit a bit of theology about how it fits together. Again, lots of theologians in the room, please go away and assess what I'm saying. Okay? Right, I'm going to start just quickly. And I know I have to be cut off quickly here, so you can shut me up at any point. Right, but I do want to ask this question. If God said to me it was Leviathan, and God said to this man, it's an idol, and he was talking about a philosophy, yeah? A philosophy. And this is, how does it fit together? Now, one of the things that Paul says, which is, to me was surprising, in Galatians, he talks about the acts of the flesh. And when we talk about the acts of the flesh, we will all think of sexual immorality, rudeness, arrogance, etc., etc. Those are the acts of the flesh. But Paul puts something else slap bang in the middle of that passage. It's Galatians 15, 19 to 23. He puts slap bang in the middle two words that go with acts of the flesh. And he says idolatry and witchcraft. Who would put those two as acts of the flesh? I would not put those two as acts of the flesh. I was really surprised when I read it. And I felt God led me to. Those of you who have, I'm sure most of you in this room may have read The Mission of God by Chris Wright. Chris Wright is the Old Testament theologian who used to lead all nations. He is a world scholar on Old Testament theology. And he said these three things. I'm going to be going on too long here, but cut me off.
No.
Okay, right. He said three things, and it's quite important. So this is not from me, not brilliant Shunu. This is Chris Wright, okay? He said, firstly, in the Old Testament, idolatry is not firstly the worship of the created order. It is not about worshipping human beings or the sun and the moon and the stars. He said, secondly, it is not about a direct involvement with demons. We think that's what idolatry is, but he said, no, it's not that. Though Paul does say that if you get involved with idolatry, you are touching into the demonic. Yeah? And equally, Hosea talks about the spirit of prostitution. So there's something that the flesh and the spirit come together. Zechariah speaks about the spirit of impurity when he's talking about idols. So there is this spiritual dimension, but Chris Wright said it's not. Idolatry is neither the worship of creation, neither is it direct involvement with demons. But this is what he says it is. He says that the most commonly way that idolatry is described is the work of human hands. Now that's extraordinary, because he's saying idolatry is something that you create. It's not a fixed idol necessarily, but it is the work of what people build and create. Now, and this is what he says, and I need to read this out to you. And there's a story. Hosea argues against King Jeroboam. This is what King Jeroboam did. He is denounced for his idolatry. But do you know what he did in practice? He decided he's in the northern kingdom and he's afraid that all his people will go down to Jerusalem, and then they will start politically allying with the king of Jerusalem. So instead of sending them there to worship God, he said, you know what? Your God is these calves. He is Yahweh. He's these calves that I'm going to put in Dan and Bethel. And he used it. He created a cultic place using God's name for political gain. And this is what Chris Wright says. He wasn't suggesting they worship other gods but Yahweh. The name on the top of the page was Yahweh. The table of contents was very much of his own making, fashioned by human hands. In effect, he's taking the things of God and he's using them and developing something for his own purposes. And he said the living God was being commandeered and crafted through state propaganda to serve the needs of national security, of form of idolatry that did not perish with Jeroboam. Idolatry is fundamentally rebellion against the living God. We know that, but it's a subtle form of rebellion. It's where we take the things that belong to God and we make something else of them that does not put God first. So that is not. Now we can understand how that does. If you take, see, in critical social justice, there are two great things of God. The value of the individual, how deeply valued that we are. That comes from Judeo-Christian history. And freedom. We are all made free will, with free will. The two tenets of biblical Judaism, of how God made us, have become the building blocks of an alternative philosophy. And that is the idol we have created. And what happens is that when you create an idol, and this is where when John Walton says it is not a moral agent, you are creating something that can be inhabited by demonic powers. We all have encountered that. If the post office story is not an example of an institutional structure being embedded by demonic powers, I don't know what is. That isn't, because what has happened is that people have taken what is of God, and this is what, and those of you who have listened to, who know Derek Prince. Derek Prince is raving Pentecostal, but he was also a professor of Greek from Cambridge. So, good scholarship too. He said, Derek Prince said, Satan's kingdom is no jungle. It is a divinely given organizational system. The chief angel in charge of a large section of angels rebelled against God and took the system with him. There is nothing that Satan can create. But oh my goodness, does he take what God has and he uses us to create idols which then are inhabited by God. Now I'm going to stop there because I could go on and I'm not going to, because there are many, what we learned, and when I say we, I mean those of my brothers and sisters in the room who were ex-Ignis church leaders, because we were all ex-Ignis church leaders together. What we learned is that you will not change things on the ground until you both hit them in the air and you deal with them on the ground. And we have to be people who understand the spirit of the age. We have to understand how the enemy works. We need to understand how to bind and loose in the heavenlies, and we need to act it out in loving ways, not aggressive ways, but loving ways in speaking the truth on the ground. And that is the way we'll change it. And that's what Phil is doing, Julie's doing here on this whole stuff with cultural fluency, is that we've got to get up to speed. We've got to get up to speed. We've got to understand this idol. And I want to offer that to you, the idea that there is some coming together of, in this case, of Leviathan and idolatry, but generally speaking, we have to understand the spiritual force, and we have to understand how that idol has been built on the ground to undo it. And so, I don't really know what my question is. You can talk about anything you like. That is what I wanted to do. I hope that was a good.